Hello and welcome to the Food Programme and our annual catch-up and discussion about the food books we have loved this year. I'm Leyla Kazim.
Coming up.
It's the most engaging, clearly written, jargon-free account of how we got into the current mess.
The year of easy, I guess, is the kind of overarching trend. 23 books of the top 50 have words in the title like easy, no fuss.
This book is so witty and full of personality that it is just an absolute joy.
What I love about her work is that despite knowing everything there is to know about Nigerian food, she writes about it with such warmth and approachability and heart.
More from our panel of book reviewers in just a moment. And later, I'll be speaking to food writer and former Bake Off star Ruby Tandoh, who you heard there, whose latest book takes a look at what influences how we eat, from cookbooks and magazine supplements to politics and social media. But for our first batch of reading recommendations, I asked my food programme co-presenters to come up with some suggestions for books this year that have got them thinking more about some of the big issues affecting food: cooking, eating and growing. First up, it's Sheila Dillon.
It's a book that seems to say, sort of not for me. It's called Serving the Public: The Good Food Revolution in Schools, Hospitals and Prisons, by a man called Professor Kevin Morgan, who's at the University of Cardiff. And it is so not a book just for specialists. He joins the dots between climate change, farming, the cost of living, health, cooking, whether you can or you can't, or whether, you can't afford to, food retailing, food service. He shows how they're all linked and why we are now such a sick society. I mean, we keep saying these things. We keep saying, the UK, like the USA, has these fantastically high obesity rates, diabetes type 2, stroke, cancer, heart disease. And I want to say, read this book. He manages that really difficult task of not pontificating, and he makes you feel, but especially as the last section is called Prospects for Change, he makes you feel hopeful. It's what, the four of us saw judging, the Food and Farming Awards this year. Change is happening, and people, in spite of barriers, are optimistic. And it's a very optimistic book, even though it tells you a very depressing story.
And Jaega Wise, what would you recommend reading this year? A book that's helped you make sense, perhaps, of what's going on around us in terms of climate, food prices, food shortages.
I feel, Leyla, like I'm constantly busy and my life is all go, go, go. So I'm after a bit of a change of lifestyle. So I've picked a book that will help me feel more present, more in the moment, and will help me to eat better food. So I've chosen Give It a Grow by Martha Swales. And this is a gardening book / recipe book. And it's about making the most of your garden, patio or balcony.
Martha is brilliant. I actually follow her on social media. She had this tiny paved over space that she inherited when she moved into her place. And then the abundance she gets from it is kind of astounding.
5 foods you can grow from the supermarket that are actually worth doing. Number 1 is garlic greens. Peel the cloves, pop them in a bowl of water, and 2 weeks later,
Martha Swales wants to help you create a garden that doesn't, up to a point, need to be tended all the time, because we all live such busy lives and you do want to partake in a bit of gardening, but also there are times when life gets in the way, your job gets in the way, other pressures get in the way. And what I love about this book is that it makes growing fruits and vegetables accessible. The book deep dives into how to grow potatoes in pots or tomatoes in hanging baskets or carrots in a bucket. And it's also full of recipes. So things like barbecued courgettes with chili, mint and feta, a grow your own Caesar salad. This book makes growing your own food seem not only doable, but relatively straightforward.
She does make it seem really easy. And I think it's totally inspiring as well.
It really is. And just the amount you could potentially grow in a small space. It's huge.
I love that. Thanks so much, Jaega. And Dan, what about you?
Well, the book that made me think this year is by Stuart Gillespie. Title is Food Fight from Plunder and Profit to People and Planet. The book, it's almost like going through the archive of the food programme over the last 40 or so years, because it takes you through the story of how is it that we've ended up with a food system that isn't working for people and planet. And the reason why Stuart Gillespie is able to tell this story in a fresh, engaging way is because he's been living through the food system, working for various UN agencies, then being part of the International Food Policy Research Institute. For example, he tells the story of being in India, being in a forest where suddenly he's at gunpoint and these Maoist rebels are talking to him, saying, "Who are you? Why are you here?" And now he is obviously thinking, "Who are you? Why are you here?" And then follows this conversation about power and justice and development. And they're telling him, "We don't need development, we need justice." And this takes him into stories of tea and the history of India and the East India Company and land and indigenous people. So it's told as a very personal story.
Is it an uplifting book?
It is. Well, the last, though you start off thinking, oh, another book where it's going to be doom and gloom about how, the broken food system, it's actually one about a changing conversation around food, changing government policies around food, and a huge degree of optimism. And I think you get this sense in the section on transformation that this growing awareness, not only at a governmental level when you think about the impact the food system's having on health budgets, but at individual level. So he talks about our role as individuals and the way in which families, parents are frustrated about what their kids are exposed to and that they want change. So I would recommend this book not only for a deep dive and analysis of how did we get here, but also how do we get out of here into a very different way of feeding ourselves.
Thank you so much, both. We'll be coming back to this conversation in a bit. And of course, we will publish the full list of titles on our website. Now here's Tom Tivnan from the Bookseller magazine to tell us what kind of year it's been for cookbook authors.
Not a brilliant one. Sales overall are about 11% down year on year. So the worst year since 2018. But that kind of is in the context that the last few years, at least since 2019, have been really good for cookery books. So we're coming down from a big height.
Do we know what's causing people to buy fewer books? And are there as many being published?
The big thing is that the big brand authors, the sort of Nathan Anthony's, the Pinch of Noms, those type of people are having a poorer year than they've had in the past few. One of the reasons for that is the sort of decline in the appliance market, shall we say. The air fryer and slow cooker books are not doing as well as they had done. There's a sort of inside book tradey thing in that a big market for these big brand authors is supermarkets. And they're selling fewer books than before. They're just taking space away from books because books don't have higher price margins as, I don't know, cereal or avocados or whatever. And I should say this isn't just in the cookery market, but it is a big space for those sort of big brand cookery authors. So that's one of the reasons. But yes, I would say that there are fewer books being published. There's this sort of trend in publishing to do fewer but better.
And of the books that are doing well, what are the subjects that seem to be appealing?
It's the year of easy, I guess, is the kind of overarching trend. About 23 books of the top 50 thus far this year have words in the title like easy, no fuss, simple. I think this is a follow-on from the sort of air fryer and the slow cooker market in that people don't have as much time and they want to bung things in and kind of do it quickly. It's interesting in that the sort of, in inverted commas, the sort of a higher end of the cookery writers are leaning into this as well. Sabrina Gayor's new one is called Persiana Easy. So the whole market is reflecting that, people are time pressed.
And which of the authors are selling the most?
Well, as always, Jamie Oliver. He is not only the biggest selling cookery author since records began, he's the biggest selling nonfiction author. And he's had a big bounce back year because I think he only sold £4 million worth of books last year. But At this point that we're talking, he's sold about £5 million. He's the only one thus far who has sold more than £1 million. So he's having a monster year. Other than that, it's kind of the influencer space that's doing well. Emily English, who's a nutritionist and influencer, she's doing really well. The Pinch of Nom folk are still doing well, with the caveat that these books from these brands are not making as much money as they had been in the last 2 or 3 years.
Well, this is a point because it seems like a lot of people on social media who do have a lot of followers kind of automatically get a book deal at some point. Are they a sure bet for publishers? Does having a high following automatically mean you're going to sell a lot of books?
No. For every Nathan Anthony, we have Nathan Anthony, a huge social media star, and then he got his book deal, and he's done very well. For every one of him, there's about 10 influencers who don't do as well, who only sell maybe 4,000 or 5,000 copies. That, I should say, is the nature of the game in publishing, full stop. Every book they publish, they want to be a bestseller, but every book can't. So, you try to go for someone with a ready-made audience.
What I do worry is that those cookbook authors who are maybe more research-based and who perhaps spend longer on creating these books don't necessarily always get as much of a looking as someone who already exists on social media with a big following.
In a weird way, this year might be good for those people. The books that sell well in, say, Waterstones or independent bookshops, the sort of Diana Henry end of the market, that has done really well. So maybe publishers are thinking, well, I might not sell 1 million copies, but they're a sure bet if we do publicity well with it.
Okay, Tom, so what are the top 5 food books for 2025? Let's do a countdown.
Number 5, Nathan Anthony, Board of Lunch, 6-ingredient slow cooker. Emily English at number 4, Live to Eat. Number 3 is the most recent Pinch of Nom slow cooker. Jamie Oliver, Easy Air Fryer is number 2. And at number 1, it's Jamie Oliver, Eat Yourself Healthy. It's sold 100,000 more copies at this point than his 1 in 24.
So 2 slow cooker books, 1 air fryer book, an Eat Healthy book.
Yes. I know we've been discussing the appliance market has gone down, but they have kind of contracted from the previous year.
And Emily English's book.
Who's a nutritionist.
So health and ease from appliances are occupying the top spaces.
Yeah. The healthy eating in the vegetarian market is still very strong. It's the part that hasn't slipped.
And Tom, do you have a favourite book from 2025? It can be a recipe book or a book about food that you've enjoyed.
I have several. I would say my number 1 is Sami Tamimi's Bustani. He is Ottolenghi's business partner, I believe, and this is a recipe book from his native Palestine, and it's really beautifully written, and it's about the food from the region, obviously, but it has a greater weight this year with what's going on the ground in Gaza. So it really pulls me emotionally in some ways, because food in the context of people starving in Gaza means, food is political. And for him to write this is a really touching thing. This is a aubergine chickpea stew that I did just the other day. It's fantastic. And it's easy, going along with the trend that we were talking about. Most of the recipes are quite easy to follow for even the sort of non-expert cook.
Tom Tivnan from The Bookseller. Let's rejoin the team here in the studio in Bristol. We've talked about the titles dealing with some of the big ideas, but what about the books that have actually got you cooking in the kitchen, Dan? I'm looking at you. You've got a big smile on your face.
I have, and I've got a book that I've been using a lot in front of me. This is Naturally Vegan by Julius Fiedler, who some might also know on social media as Herman. I am an omnivore, and I don't ordinarily gravitate to a book with either the word vegetarian or vegan in the title, even though I do eat a lot of vegetarian and vegan foods. And the subtitle is Delicious Recipes from Around the World That Just Happen to Be Plant-Based. Now, Julius worked with Jamie Oliver, during the pandemic, started baking, had a sourdough starter called Herman, which then took him online, telling food stories, but also sharing recipes to the point, and I've just checked, he has 2.4 million followers. And then the journey that he's been on in terms of food and food storytelling is to, I think, what is out there through history that is delicious, and why did it come into different food cultures in the way it is without meat or without dairy. Through most of our history as a species, we have mostly been vegan and vegetarian. We haven't labelled it as such. And I think this is the really powerful reminder in the book. So you dive into the book and it does take you to every food culture, or I would argue the most delicious food cultures in the world. So you have Indian, you have recipes from Spain, from Lebanon, from China. Sicily obviously is in there. My family background makes me gravitate towards his very simple and effectively it's so delicious caponata recipe. There's an aubergine and chickpea moussaka. It kind of freed me up from the idea of, these are vegetarian recipes, and just reminded me of the fact that actually the most delicious food cultures in the world are mostly vegetarian and vegan.
I have this book as well, and I think it's brilliant. Jaega, what about you? What's got you rustling something up tasty in the kitchen?
Well, less rustling, more drinking. So the book I've chosen is simply called Wine, and it's by Ollie Smith. So Ollie Smith has been a presenter on Saturday Kitchen, so I was very interested to get my hands on this. Firstly, this book is so witty and full of personality that it is just an absolute joy to pick up. In the opening stages of the book, he chooses wines to match your food or your mood. He goes through some great food combinations, things like pizza and pet nat, roast lamb and rioja, and then he has this whole other section about let's have some wine depending on how you feel. He then goes into 12 categories of hangover and how to defeat them, including names like the Sleeping Dragon Hangover and the Deceiver. And he has advice like eating buttered sourdough to listening to Schubert's Piano Sonata 21 in B flat. The whole book, it's alive with wit. I really loved it.
I think it sounds good because he's basically helping you figure out what to drink based on how you feel, which is quite an easy starting point for anyone, because it's more easy to figure out, how do I feel right now, rather than walking into a wine shop or the drinks aisle and going, I don't know where to start. So he's sort of giving you a different starting point, which feels more accessible.
And Leyla, what book have you got?
Okay, my book is from 2 years ago, but I have to include it. But it's Winter Wellness by Rachel de Thample. She has such good knowledge of the medicinal benefits of eating certain foods. And this entire book, because obviously winter is grey, it's cold, everyone's got colds all of the time. And we need to do as much as we can to boost our immune system. And every recipe in this book has that in mind. And she's got all these amazing tips also about sprouting. Oh my God, guys, I've become a cereal sprouter because of this book. She has a whole section on sprouting legumes. So she says you just get so much more nutritional benefit from them. But she's got sections on easy to digest one dish dinners. She's got energizing breakfast. And there's also really good pantry sections. So it's like store cupboard remedies. So, for example, I made her golden butter, which is basically coconut oil with turmeric and black pepper. And that's a liquid. And then you keep it in the fridge. And I put that on toast. So many of her sweet treats. I made her little biscuits, which are dates and cocoa. What I particularly love about this book is that any recipe in it is going to be both good for you and delicious.
Sheila, what is your choice of book that's got you cooking?
Well, I'm afraid I've squeezed rather a lot in here. I was very charmed by Mark Diacono's Abundance, Eating and Living with the Season. And that's based on his Substack. Substack has become this sort of treasure chest, really, of good food writing. And there's an immediacy and freshness about the Substack. But that immediacy and freshness hasn't gone away, having been turned into a book, and really good recipes. But my two favourites these two are linked. One is called Kapusta, Vegetable Forward Recipes from Eastern Europe, and it's by Alyssa Temoshkina. And the other one is Indian Kitchens, Treasured Family Recipes from Across the Land by Rupa Gulati. And I've linked them together because they both bring alive countries and regions through meals cooked at home. Now, Rupa Gulati is a professional chef. You know, for 5 years, she was chef at the Taj Mahal Hotel in New Delhi. But she was born in Cumbria, and she now lives back in the UK. But for this book, she's gone traveling in every region of India, using all her contacts and her family connections. So if you want to know what upper-class families are eating in Rajasthan, you read Rupa's account of her time with Bhavna Singh, and then follow immediately, you can make her papadum curry. And so we meet all these really keen cooks and eaters from all over the country. And Rupa draws you in, her recipes work. You know, I made her Parsi chicken curry with potatoes. You know, it's just a terrific book. And I really feel that Rupa Gulati has not had the credit that she should have had, you know, for all that she's done. The other book is Kapusta by Alyssa Temoshkina. That, in a way, has more sadness behind it. She's Russian, and as she says in the introduction, the book she planned before the Russian invasion of Ukraine had to be altered. She says, I cannot bring myself to celebrate the culinary culture of that country that has launched an atrocious war in the heart of Eastern Europe. But what she's written is just marvelous. It's 7 chapters of foods that say comfort and joy. Cabbage, beetroot, potato, dumplings, carrot, mushrooms, and pickles and ferments. And she's caught a certain fashion, but it's amazing to see what you can do with cabbage. For example, she has Eastern European spag bol, but the noodles are sauerkraut. It's just a most engaging, and like both Rupa's book and this one, you know, are just beautiful.
So what have you made from that book, Sheila?
I made her borscht with mushrooms and prunes. I mean, I know, I've been told, you know, there are as many varieties of borscht as there are varieties of minestrone, but it's really delicious. It's very, very good.
Thank you, Sheila. My next interview is with a writer who's been trying to debunk some of what she calls lies that appear in recipes that can lead to some of these unintended outcomes. So here's Carla Lalli, formerly of Bon Appétit magazine, who made a name for herself on their YouTube channel and has now published a number of cookbooks.
After developing recipes for the past 15 years and overseeing a test kitchen with lots of other cooks, I came to realize that there were things that I had done in my own career and written into recipes that had maybe inadvertently misled readers. And I felt like pulling back the fourth wall on that.
Another lie that recipe developers tell you is that sheet pan dinners are good. If a recipe says that you can put a bunch of stuff on a sheet pan all at the same time and put it in the oven at the same temperature and cook it for one amount of time and that it's going to be good, that is such a lie.
I definitely think of these lies as misguidance or places where the aspiration of the recipe writer doesn't necessarily align with the clear instruction that we give. So there are times when we sell a recipe to the reader and lose sight of the fact that our job is to make sure that readers have a great experience cooking at home.
Another lie that recipe developers tell you is that all of the recipes in their cookbooks have been cross-tested. As someone who has worked on other people's cookbooks and also written 3 of my own, I will tell you that not every recipe has been cross-tested.
You know, one of the lies that I did on the TikTok series is that if you don't have pasta cooking liquid to emulsify your pasta sauce, that you can just use plain tap water. And that was the kind of thing that when I was working at Bon Appétit, we would say, never throw out the pasta water. It's liquid gold. The starch in the water is key to emulsifying your sauce. But the truth is you can just use water. And it would have been really nice to share that with readers instead of making them feel like if they dumped their pasta water that they would ruin the dish. And actually, there are many cases where the pasta water itself might be too salty, and that if you use the pasta water, you're going to oversalt your sauce. So that's the kind of insight that I wish sometimes in editorial, when everything needs to be pithy and punchy and concise, that we could actually say, no, there's actually more than one way to do this.
Do you think recipe writers and developers sometimes sort of underestimate or overestimate what home cooks can handle?
Yes, definitely. We make assumptions a lot of the time about the type of equipment that people have at home. And this is another lie that recipe developers tell you, is that the type of cookware that you use doesn't matter as long as the dimensions are what we're calling for. And it's not true. Equipment that isn't well made or sturdy can contribute a tremendous amount to the success or failure of a recipe. And we leave that out all the time. And cooks will not know what they did wrong. And it's actually not their fault at all. It's the cookware that they're using.
And are there any particular phrases or instructions that you read that always make your eyes roll?
Yeah, I think when recipe writers put in the ingredient list to use something of good quality, and I put that in like air quotes, to say a good quality olive oil, for example, is a pet peeve of mine. It doesn't mean anything. So what means something is whether the olive oil is extra virgin or not. And within extra virgin, there can be, of course, like a very wide range, and you should taste your olive oil. But saying good quality will just make the cook wonder if they have a good enough thing or not. It's not helpful at all. I also really don't like it when a recipe writer will say to use organic. I can understand that, using organic produce comes with certain environmental upsides. On the other side, an organic carrot behaves the same way as a conventional carrot in a recipe, and organic is more expensive. So these are things that people write into their recipes that actually are alienating to the reader and make them wonder if they can afford to make the recipe, frankly.
Food writer Carla Lalli speaking to me from her home in Brooklyn, New York. Sheila, do you come across these lies or mistakes in recipes much?
Well, the commonest lie, it seems like a hard word, but it is a lie, actually, is saute your onions for 3 or 4 minutes until they're soft. Well, I'd like to meet the person who could do that. It's nonsense. And it's got worse because there is premium now on making things quickly. But you can't change the material world in that way. Onions require a lot more than 3 or 4 minutes to become soft.
Yeah, and if you want to make the onions a bit brown, it's like a 15-minute thing. It takes a long time.
It does. And I was just thinking of a book I love, Ottolenghi's Simple book. I've used it a lot, and there are some great recipes. He's really good on cauliflower. He loves cauliflower. I love cauliflower, so I make everything where he uses cauliflower. So I made this. It says I made this on the 6th of March, 25, and it's curried egg and cauliflower salad. And my main notes, I make notes all over my recipes, and it says, good taste and easy. But on the right-hand side, I've written in big letters, 40 minutes. And that's because it says to make my cauliflower florets soft and golden brown in the oven, it will be 15 minutes. Well, what a laugh. It's not remotely 15 minutes. It was 40.
Yeah. You should write into Yotam, see what he has to say about that.
Yeah. Well,
Thank you, Sheila. One of the books I've really enjoyed this year is by someone who's never afraid to challenge the status quo. She's a food writer and author who first became well known after coming second on Bake Off all the way back in 2013. And since then, she's written cookbooks and cultural essays. And her new book, all-consuming, looks at modern food culture and where it's come from. It's Ruby Tandoh. Ruby, it's so lovely to see you. Thanks for joining us. And congratulations on your new book. Could you explain to us why you wanted to write this book?
I think because I was looking around at kind of the food culture that I actually encounter day to day, which is going to supermarkets. It is restaurants and cafes. It's just scrolling on Instagram and seeing recipes there. It's often passive absorption of kind of food culture through the media I consume as well. And I just wanted to understand, well, how did we get to this point where to be, you know, quote unquote, a foodie is almost a default? And so I wanted to journey through kind of 75, 100 years of food culture and kind of get to the bottom of that.
Because I suppose we probably don't realise it day to day, but there are so many different media via which we are being influenced. Are there any the average person might be a bit surprised about?
So much of it comes down to systems and platforms and structures. So if you think about something just like Google search engine, we tend to assume that we know what we want when we go onto it. We search for it, we find it. But it's in the very nature of how these things work that they prioritize certain results over others, and they kind of funnel more and more people towards specific recipes. So this is just one example. So in the early days of internet recipes, there's this site called All Recipes. It was one of the first kind of crowdsourced recipe platforms. And if you came up with a recipe and called it world's best lasagna, it is in the nature of like search engine optimization. It's in the nature of algorithms that will slowly rise and rise and rise and rise and rise to the point where it is like always going to be on the first page of Google. And, you know, we see it now on TikTok and Instagram with the prioritizing of kind of crispy, chewy, creamy, crunchy, all of these adjectives. Recipes didn't used to have to sell themselves that way. So this is all new.
What impact is that having on the way we cook or share recipes?
I mean, everything. It's changed the nature of recipes so much. And one, you know, example is just the increasing visuality of foods, right? So if you look at something like The Joy of Cooking, like old Betty Crocker cookbooks, anything that was big in the kind of 50s, 60s, you know, for the most part, these didn't have pictures, or they had very few pictures, and they were more kind of vibe pictures if you look at like a Robert Carrier cookbook or something. And yet, when you move into the age of recipes online, your first contact with the recipe is no longer the cookbook itself, or even the title of the recipe. It's the picture of the recipe, or it's the video. And that means that the visuals have to do so much heavy lifting. And so we see a certain colour palette emerge on Instagram. There's a really, really big recipe platform called Mob. They're huge, especially in the UK. They're based in London. And I was talking to the guy who founded that, Ben Liebus, for the book. And he had been kind of listening to pop psychology podcasts about colour theory and colour psychology and what things people react well to. And then if you look at loads of the photos that they use, you see these kind of burnt sienna colours and reds, oranges, browns, anything that kind of looks a bit like a pizza, really, actually. That kind of stuff becomes prioritised. And of course, then we see a stuff like just a stew, a brown-looking stew, really taking a back seat. So it's just an example of when recipes move onto the internet, they really change shape. This is all led from social media. This isn't an organic changing of tastes, or if it is, it's a technologically mediated change of taste.
Does that mean, you know, I don't know, like a brown curry would not get as much airtime on these platforms? And then does that mean that we're just not going to be eating as much curry? Like this feels like quite a big deal.
It is a big deal. And I think it has the potential to be very flattening, really, because of the way that algorithms work. They prioritise what we already know we want. However, there are always niches. For those with the will to find, you can find any food content online, and there are ways to subvert the algorithm and its kind of homogenizing tendency.
Okay, what are you cooking at the minute? And do you think any of those things are trends that have managed to get to you?
Yeah, I used to like to think of my appetites as so personal. I was maybe a little self-absorbed with it. But recently, especially since writing the book, it's become so clear to me what a sheep I am. And, you know, sometimes that's a nice feeling in a way, because it means I'm in community with people, even if those people are on the other side of the world or whatever. A couple of things really like showcase where I'm at with food at the moment. One recent thing I cooked was like a partridge broth, which was delicious. There's a nice butcher near me and got some partridge and, you know, made this beautiful kind of crystalline broth from it, which was so lovely, and it felt so of the moment as well. And then the other thing I've got big into is like this new-ish chocolate bar that kind of went viral online recently, and it's like a peanutty caramelly one, and I'm obsessed with it.
What's it called?
It's called It's called the Big Daddy.
Okay, from?
It's from Marks and Spencer.
Okay.
Everyone was like, you need to try Big Daddy. And, you know, so I succumbed to this. But, you know, they're the two strands of my appetite. One was informed by kind of reading Jane Grigson or whatever and kind of delving into the recipe books. And the other is like, well, what's big on TikTok right now?
Do you find yourself being pulled towards trends, or do you sort of acknowledge them and try to consciously avoid them?
Oh, I am like fully open to being suckered. I kind of enjoy it. I think if you allow yourself to be completely uncritically swept away by these things, then you're kind of at the mercy of food marketing and advertising and so on. But there is something very fun about it, and I think there's something very human about this idea of contagious appetites. And even with like wellness soft drinks, which I'm very skeptical about because it's so much about marketing old drinks like kombucha or whatever in kind of weird diet aligned ways. But even with that, you know, I find it very funny. I feel like I can go into even a normal corner shop these days and find something called like free spirit gut punch or something. You know, it's really entertaining. I think we have to be able to, you know, find that part of it and, you know, interrogate it.
What usually creates these trends? Is it one thing or is it multiple factors?
There's so many things that come together at once. Something like bubble tea, which barely existed in the UK kind of 15 years ago, except among, you know, small pockets of people, you know, mainly people from Hong Kong or Taiwan who maybe knew about it, but barely outside of that. That exploded partly because tuition fee structures changed, right? And universities had to recruit more students from various places in the world. So you get an influx of students from mainland China. At the same time, Instagram launches in the UK. And at the same time, we're in the aftermath of a recession where the idea of opening a sit-down restaurant becomes just less and less feasible for people. And that incentivized hole-in-the-wall places and franchises. So you get these perfect storm of factors that leads to bubble tea, which is like highly Instagrammable, you know, really influenced by food trends coming from East and Southeast Asia, and also is inexpensive and youth-led. I find it so interesting. It's not just that something tastes good so it spreads. It's so much more than that.
I'm also really interested in the alternative places that food writers and recipe developers are sharing their words specifically, such as Substack. And I think it's amazing how basically almost every food writer or kind of food personality in some way that I know has a presence on Substack, and they're also writing on this platform. And I just think it's so interesting because they're not giving up books, but they're also writing here. And why is that?
I think, you know, this is the pessimistic answer. Part of it's just a reflection of the changing food media landscape, and there is less money in magazines and newspapers. It's hard to earn a living freelance from this kind of thing. But I think the more optimistic way of looking at this is that when you are writing on your own Substack, you have this editorial freedom and you have the ability to write the things that editors might not necessarily commission you to do. A lot of food journalism is either restaurant reviews or recipes. It's service journalism because we know people will always want that. But there is often less space for kind of discursive stuff, for essays, for reporting, and that's what people can do on Substack. They can say, do you know what, this feels important to me. I want to write about it. And, you know, lo and behold, there is an audience for that, despite the kind of sometimes the short-sightedness of editors and big publications.
And what recipe books have you really loved this year?
I mean, the standout one is Chop Chop by Ozoz Soko. It is the most kind of comprehensive but also approachably written and scholarly book about Nigerian food ever written in English. And, you know, she has this incredible library of Nigerian cookbooks from through the years, from colonial times as well, and afterwards. And she therefore has like this incredible grasp on how Nigerian food has changed through changes of regime, through changes of available ingredients. And she's just fantastic. And this book is beautiful and the recipes are great. And, you know, it's just so lovely to see Nigerian food, which hasn't always been given the space in mainstream publishing to be written about with care. She writes about it with such warmth and approachability and heart.
Sounds brilliant. Thanks, Ruby. Thanks so much.
Oh, thank you for chatting to me.
Food writer Ruby Tandoh. Her book is called All Consuming: Why We Eat the Way We Eat Now. So much book inspiration for potential gifts or just to add to your own reading list. It's such a nice time of year to get lost in a really good book. And if you want a list of the ones mentioned, we will post it on our website. But for now, thank you to Sheila Dillon, Jaega Wise and Dan Saladino and all my other guests today who've helped celebrate some of this year's best food books.
From BBC Radio 4, a near-future murder mystery in the remotest possible location.
When I grow up, I want to live on Mars.
Mars, 2048, the first settlers and the first unexplained death.
What do you mean you don't know how he died?
Can Rita and Jazz solve the murder, or will the murderer find them first?
How much is a room worth? A room full of air. I'm afraid, Mr. Hickson, the price is rather high. It may even cost you your life.
Listen to Murder on Mars first on BBC Sounds.